Betrayal is never loud. It arrives like a held breath you didn't know you were keeping. Every family hides a locked drawer inside, a truth sharp enough to wound generations. Tonight a quiet wife will choose righteous revenge over silent survival. And a child will become the mirror of every secret kept. Love will fracture, justice will whisper, and healing will cost more than anyone is ready to pay. When the final letter is read aloud, even the walls will tremble with what we tried to forget. Double quotes ... between one breath and the next. A house decides whether it is home or stranger, the voice of the story murmured. Listen, the walls are choosing. Layla sat on the edge of the living room couch the way a shoreline waits for the tide, every nerve tuned to the lock. Dawn had not yet broken. It only trembled at the edges of the curtains. Around her, the house kept its own heartbeat, heater ticking, refrigerator sighing, the pendulum clock inhaling the next second. But Lila listened for a single surgical sound, the notch click of Daniel's key. She held her coffee between both hands, though it had long turned to ash-colored chill. Beside the mug lay yesterday's newspaper, its winning lottery smile folded into the classifieds. She had underlined an apartment listing 2 towns away. The red pen bled through the page. She told herself it was for a friend, upstairs a floorboard. Creaked Eve, 11, drifting through a dream. Layla pictured her daughter sleep frowning, as she did when she ran in dreams and the ground betrayed her. On the coffee table a silver locket glimmered in the scrawny light, smaller than her thumb. It never opened. Eve wore it to bed every night, but must have slipped it off in sleep. Now it waited like a question. Lila reached for it, thumb tracing. A seam, cool, stubborn. Years ago, Daniel had bought it from a pier vendor, cheap tourist silver around a promise. He had said, "We'll put our wedding photo inside when we have one small enough," then laughed at how movie exact the line sounded. They never printed that photo. Leila had once tried to pry the clasp with a paring knife, slipped and cut. A river in her thumb. A thin scar still curved there, pale as a kept oath. Beyond the bay window, a car slowed. Tires whispered gravel, then stilled. Lila did not breathe. The silence brimmed with the floral chemical husk of another woman's perfume. The scent she had found on Daniel's collar 3 nights ago, drifting from his coat now on its peg. Orchid and newborn money. She hated how it smelled like something trying too hard to be a flower. The front handle rattled. 2 short tests before the turn. Leela's pulse hit once, then flattened. The key slid in, searching. A decisive click. Hinge sigh. Dawn entered on Daniel's silhouette. He paused, expecting dark. The lamp on the piano glowed low, revealing the slouch of his shoulders. Same coat, same scuffed briefcase, but new weariness. He closed the door gently and laid the case down. Lila smelled the perfume again, insolent, curling across the hallway like a ribbon dropped in victory. Daniel looked at the couch. He managed a lobby smile. "You're up early." "Late," she answered. He glanced at the clock. 5:12. Mom nodded, as though numbers mattered. "Couldn't sleep?" "I forgot how." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, then rubbed the bridge where fatigue met guilt. Rain darkened his coat. Outside, clouds gathered. Daniel shrugged it free. Leila watched droplets fall to the parquet, tiny mirrored moons dissolving. "How was the trip?" she asked. A blur of invoices. His briefcase remained by the door. He had not traveled. His tires had not left town. A hush pressed in, expanding. The house, sensing fracture, held its breath, the way children do when adults stop pretending. Lila toyed with the locket like a sailor worrying a map's edge. "Eve's awake," she said. "School doesn't start for hours. She dreams loud." Leela's thumb found her scar and pressed until it stung. Daniel removed his shoes carefully, aligning them side by side with the ceremony learned in his mother's house, precise, afraid of dirt. He looked older copying that ritual. He stepped farther in. Floorboards registered his weight. The perfume mingled with stale coffee. She swallowed both. "Want me to warm your cup?" he offered. "It's colder than I am." She set the mug aside, stood, and the locket slipped, clinking on wood. Daniel bent to pick it up. Lila almost warned him it doesn't open. He turned, it in his fingers, studying the seam. "She still wears this?" he asked. "Every night." He placed the locket in her palm, a returned coin between debtors. His wedding band caught the lamp's glow. A memory surfaced. Their first apartment. Boxes stacked like fortresses. Daniel oiling a squeaky door hinge at 2 a.m. so Lila's insomnia could pace silently. Love measured in eliminated noises. Lila closed her fingers around the locket. "You didn't kiss me goodbye last night," she said. The sentence felt small and fatal. Daniel's jaw shifted. "You were asleep. You looked peaceful." "I was rehearsing stillness." He reached out, not to her, but the air, then let the gesture fall. Eve's footstep padded overhead. Daniel's eyes lifted. "She'll come down if we talk here, then talk upstairs." Her voice surprised her brittle. Daniel misread it as invitation. He moved toward the staircase, climbing toward absolution. Each step resisted before accepting, the wood remembering every weight. Lila stayed rooted. When Daniel disappeared at the landing, she slipped to the coat rack. Her hand entered his pocket. Perfume punched the air. She found a folded receipt linen paper, watermark of an expensive restaurant. 2 dinners Merlot, a dessert labeled for lovers. Date stamped last night, 11:47 p.m. In the inner pocket she brushed velvet. A slim jewelry box. Inside lay a small brass key, edges shiny from long use. A note beneath. "For when I'm gone, so you don't have to knock." No name, only a swirl. For a moment she closed her eyes and pictured the door the key might open. Not a motel room, but a small apartment trembling in premature freedom. Secondhand sofa. Unfurnished walls. A refrigerator that hummed as though begging forgiveness. She imagined Daniel there, dropping his shoes wherever they fell, cultivating a hush where nobody asked him to explain midnight departures or dawn returns. In that invented space, she smelled fresh paint rolled over past tenants' quarrels, saw a single water glass turned upside down to dry, and recognized how loneliness can masquerade as relief, the kind that feels like breathing until the quiet starts to bruise. Her grip tightened around the velvet box. Memory backswept to their wedding reception, Daniel spinning her beneath paper lanterns, promising he would never let go, while his father, flushed with champagne, declared that the best marriages are built on impossible oaths. Lila had nodded because the music was loud and contradiction felt unromantic. Now stroking the anonymous key, she understood. Impossible is only a lock that time intends to pick. She returned everything, pressing palms against the coat's lining, measuring how long ago he unshouldered fidelity. Upstairs, a door clicked, their bedroom. Layla pictured him inhaling sheets that knew only her weight. She approached the piano and sat. She had not played in months. Still, her fingers found middle C. The note lingered, moderate and blue. Daniel's footsteps crossed overhead. He was pacing. She tapped D, then E, a slow arpeggio rising. She remembered evenings when he hummed in the doorway while she practiced beer. Easy laughter, belief. Now each note sounded like a lie. She stopped. Eve appeared at the stairs, hair tangled, locket chain glinting. "Mom?" Her eyes scanned the room as though someone had moved the furniture of certainty. Lila opened her arms. Eve curled into her lap. The locket pressed against Lila's ribs. Unopened universe. Did Dad get home? Eve asked. He's upstairs, Lila said, smoothing her hair. She wondered what Eve smelled. Perfume, coffee, trimmer. Eve lifted her wrist. A faint scrape reddened the skin. I tried. Opening it again. Some things open when they're ready. What if they never are? Then we learn their shape from the outside. Sadness soaked her words. Footsteps descended. the measured cadence Daniel used entering a meeting. Leila set Eve aside. Daniel paused 3 steps up, briefcase in hand. He looked at them as if framing a portrait that might accuse him. Something in his gaze had shifted, resolved toward truth or deeper camouflage. He opened his mouth. A word balanced there. Before. It jumped. Lila rose, walked to the foyer, and laid her hand on the door. Wood cool as river stone. She turned the latch halfway enough for a draft, not an exit. Daniel whispered her name, but the house swallowed it. Lila rested her forehead against the panel, listening. The hush in the keyhole, the wind considering morning, the heartbeat. Returning to her chest. Behind her, Daniel descended 1 step enough to make the staircase groan like a warning. Another. The door was closed. Yet the space between its grain and her skin felt ajar, the door between heartbeats. In that sliver she placed every unanswered question, every scent that did not belong, every chord she would not play. Daniel reached the bottom. His shoes were still off, but the echo of their future footsteps filled the hallway, louder than solace. On wood. Leila straightened, hand on the latch. She did not turn. She spoke to the door, to the breath width dividing them. Keys only fit the locks they earn. Silence answered, vast and listening. Somewhere in it, a hinge decided which way it would swing. The front door stood shut, but Daniel's footsteps kept echoing upstairs. Even bowls hold echoes when no one is listening. The story's hush began. Put your ear to the porcelain, and you will hear yesterday trying to rinse itself away. Sunlight filtered through the small kitchen window in a narrow blade. The kind children fear will slice the day in half. It settled on a rack of dishes still slick from last night's apology meal, half-washed plates. A lone wine glass fogged by detergent breath. The skillet Daniel had sworn to scrub, but left soaking in cold gray water. Leila stood barefoot on the cracked linoleum, feeling the tiles chill seep into her bones, until even memory shivered. Her thumb ran along the chipped rim of a saucer. The glaze was spider-webbed, thin cracks branching like unspoken grievances. She imagined her mother's hands beneath the faucet of another house. Another life scrubbing until the blue flowers on cheap china blurred, because scrubbing felt like confession with proof afterward. Clean enough, Mama? Leila had once asked. No such thing as clean enough, her mother muttered, wrists blazing red. Shame, Leila understood early, required friction to come off. It also grew back. Eve was at the rectangular table, legs swinging above the floor, a pencil stilled between her fingers. A math workbook splayed open before her, margins tattooed with doodles of moons and doorways. The girl hummed under her breath, soft, circular, sorrowful. Lila knew the tune. She had heard it float from her grandmother's cracked lips those nights the old woman sat by a coal stove, rocking grief as though it were a fevered child. No one had ever taught Eve that lullaby. Sweetheart. Leila whispered, as though speaking too loud would bruise the sound. Where did you learn that song? Eve shrugged, embarrassed by attention. It just comes, like tasting rain in the air. The girl's hair, streaked gold by the sunbeam, reminded Leila of cornfields outside her childhood window, the place she ran from but never escaped. She brushed a strand behind Eve's ear, then turned to the sink. Blue-white suds glistened, blinking like distant stars. Leila plunged her hands in, surprised by the cold. The water heater had gone out again, another thing Daniel promised to fix. She lifted a plate, streaked with tomatoes rust. The motion triggered a memory of her mother in a faded nightdress, mouth a tight line, scrubbing and muttering. If a man brings dirt in, a woman must scour it out. What year had that been? She couldn't tell. Kitchens existed outside calendars in the hallway. The grandfather clock moaned 10:15. Daniel had left at dawn in a hurry that felt rehearsed. His kiss tasted of mint he didn't own. Leila pictured the passenger seat of his car, the indentation of a body lighter than hers, perfume etched into upholstery. She washed the thought as fiercely as she washed the dishes, but both stains clung. Eve hummed louder, building the lullaby into something restless. "You want music?" Leela asked. Eve shook her head, eyes on a subtraction problem she had solved. 3 different ways, none of which felt right. "I miss Grandma," the girl said suddenly. "So do I." "But you didn't like her singing that song." Lila wiped her hands on a flour-smudged towel, salt of old dough flaking away. "Because she sang it when her heart hurt. And I wanted her heart to rest. But maybe hearts don't know how." Eve said, voice small as candle flame. A fork slipped from Lila's fingers, climbed into the basin. Water splashed up, catching the sun, raining miniature prisms across the cupboard doors. Lila's heartbeat matched each droplet. She was about to speak when a slow drip echoed into the hush the faucets tired, gasket-releasing beads one after another. Drip, pause, drip, like minutes dripping out of a cracked clock. She tightened the handle until metal squeaked. The drip stopped, but in the silence, Lila heard her mother again. "Do not let things leak. A leak invites rot. Finish the page," she told Eve, and turned to the refrigerator. Magnets pinned snapshots, Eve at age 4 beneath a sprinkler, Leela holding a chocolate-smeared apron, Daniel laughing with sunlight in his eyes. She focused on the smallest photo, Daniel and Eve building a gingerbread house, roof sliding, frosting everywhere. Lila had taken that picture while nursing a quiet jealousy at how easily he could bend time into play. She opened the fridge. Inside, a lipstick-red container held leftover pasta. On its lid, condensation beaded like nervous sweat. She recalled last night's dinner, Daniel swirling sauce in a wooden spoon, insisting they needed comfort food. The steam had smelled of oregano and something sweeter, maybe the wine in his glass, maybe secrecy simmering. He'd forced a laugh when Lila asked, "Long day?" and replied, "Same old, same old." The phrase felt like a wall dropped between them. From the table Eve began to hum again, softer, as though coaxing an answer from the air. Lila closed the fridge, pressed her forehead against the cool door. Her mother's voice blended with the lullaby, 2 ghosts sharing a throat. She sensed the generational bruise, handed down like china, women polishing away men's absences, believing shine equaled wholeness. The mail lay unopened near the toaster. She sifted the pile electric bill, coupon sheets, an envelope addressed to Daniel in looping handwriting she didn't recognize. She set it aside, pulse quickening. When she turned back, Eve had stopped humming. The girl was staring at her workbook, fingers worrying the page edge. Lila crossed the room and crouched. "Stuck?" Eve's eyes flicked the hallway, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I was using scratch paper," she said, sliding a sheet toward her mother. It wasn't scratch paper. It was glossy, folded into fourths, edges neat. Leela recognized that tension in paper, thin enough to tear, thick enough to hide. She unfolded it, expecting doodles. Instead, a hotel logo winked. Up, the Harbor Lantern Inn, a date 3 days ago. Room 217. Guest, Daniel W. Rowan, 1 night. 2 guests. The kitchen shrank. Light-pierced suds left in the basin, turning them opalescent like oil on water. Leela felt her pulse in her ears, a drumbeat out of sync with the faucet's faint resumption. Of dripping, she must not have tightened it enough. Drip, drip. Eve watched her, fear blooming. "I needed paper," she whispered. "I didn't know. Where was this?" "In Dad's jacket. He was looking for a pen and dropped it. I thought it was trash." Trash. Lila smoothed the receipt, though nothing would smooth. What it meant. $78, taxes included. A note scribbled at the bottom. "See you there, -C." Her mind reached for logic, found none. She saw her mother's hands again, red and raw, and understood. Sometimes you scrub it because you couldn't unsee what stained you. She folded the receipt smaller, tighter, until it disappeared inside her fist. Eve whispered, "Mom?" Leela's voice emerged like a spoon scraping the bottom of an empty pot. "Finish your subtraction." She kissed the crown of Eve's head, lips lingering longer than necessary, inhaling the child's soap mint scent, proof of something still unsullied. She stood and crossed to the sink. Steam rose. She didn't remember turning on the hot tap. Water scalded her wrists, yet she didn't flinch. She scrubbed the skillet, nails scraping char. The rinse water ran rusty with sauce, then pink, then clear. Still, she scrubbed. Behind her, the lullaby returned, Eve humming softer now, perhaps to soothe her mother, perhaps to mourn. The same 3 notes, looping like a ribbon knotted around. History. Lila's throat tightened. She understood what her grandmother had whispered once when Lila begged her to stop singing. "If I don't tell the pain where to go, it will breed in my bones." Layla dried the skillet, placed it upside down on the stove. Her reflection bent across its warped surface, eyes tired, mouth uncertain, a woman tethered between cleaning and breaking. She considered tearing the receipt, but the paper felt alive, pulsing. Evidence, her mind named it, evidence of what Daniel dared carry into the house like invisible perfume. She walked to the junk drawer, the place where scissors tangled with rubber bands and forgotten chargers. On top lay a small spiral notebook, a ledger she'd started when suspicion first whispered, times Daniel got home, excuses offered, texts he answered in another room. She slid the hotel receipt between its pages. A hidden blade. A single ant crawled along the countertop, drawn by Sugar's memory. Layla crushed it with the pad of her thumb, wiped the smear with the corner of her shirt, and stared at the spot where it had been. Small violences were easier than large truths. Eve closed the workbook, chair legs scraping. "Mom, can we bake?" "Something? It smells sad in here." Leela turned. Sad smelled like detergent, metal, and silence. "We'll bake later, love." Her voice was damp wool. "Promise?" "I promise," she said, though promises had become slippery things. Eve gathered her books. The math workbook slipped, pages fanning. Another receipt fluttered out. Gas station. Time-stamped midnight. 2 candy bars. Leela's breath caught. She pictured Daniel buying sugar for a road he shouldn't have been on, bribing himself with sweetness. She let the slip fall, as though hands refused more weight. Eve hugged her waist. "You're shaking." "I'm just cold." "I'll get your sweater," Eve offered, too eager, as if warmth might glue them safe. She scampered down the hall, humming louder, turning the lullaby into nearly a March child's attempt at courage. Lila leaned on. The counter. The faucet dripped again, each drop a metronome marking how quickly faith unravels. Drip, drip. She reached out, tightened the handle until her knuckles blanched, but water found another path, stubborn. Across the room, sunlight had shifted, striking the wine glass. A red lipstick ghost curved on its rim, the mark of last night's drink, Lila's own perhaps, or someone else's. She didn't remember wearing lipstick. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. The stain smeared into a pink bruise. Somewhere. Outside, a car door slammed, startling a pigeon into flight. Lila wondered if Daniel was already retracing whatever map of secrecy led to room numbers and late-night confections. She pressed a palm over her sternum, feeling her heart thrash like a bird trapped behind glass. Eve's footsteps returned. The girl carried a sweater smelling of lavender sheets. She helped her mother into it, small hands tugging sleeves. Leela thanked her with a smile that felt borrowed. They stood together, 2 figures inside a shaft of light, dust motes swirling. Like pale confetti marking a celebration, no one attended. The clock chimed 11. Lila heard her grandmother, her mother, herself generations shaking in the chime. She imagined future kitchens where Eve would stand, humming a song she never learned, scrubbing at stains that weren't hers. The thought hollowed her. Eve slipped the math workbook into her backpack, unaware that the world had tilted. Layla watched the zipper close over the frayed spine, felt the panic of secrets trapped with lunch money and crayons. She almost stopped her, almost reclaimed the decorated burden, but some instinct said let it travel. Evidence needed distance. To grow teeth, Eve glanced up. What's wrong? Nothing. The lie tasted like metal. Carry on. The girl nodded, trusting for now. She wandered to the living room, lullaby fading with each step until only the faucet's relentless pulse remained. Lila faced the dishes once more. The basin was empty, but suds clung to the sides in nervous lace. She rinsed them away, watching them slide into the dark of the drain. Water hissed, echoing the hush after shouted words. She turned the tap off. Silence held. Her gaze drifted to the refrigerator door, to the letter addressed to Daniel in that looping hand. She pressed it flat beneath her palm, feeling the ink raise like scars. She would open it later when the sun retreated and the kitchen shadows lengthened like answers. For now, she needed stillness, the momentary peace before paper rustled. And worlds tore. She stepped back, surveying the room. Nothing looked broken, yet everything was cracked. She breathed in the scent of detergent, hot metal, and faint orchids, the perfume Daniel's coat carried, seeping into corners. It lingered, uninvited, like the memory of a stranger's touch on a familiar shoulder. The faucet gave a final drop. It struck the stainless steel with the sound of a tiny bell. Lila whispered to the empty kitchen. Clean enough, though she knew the stain had only just begun to show. Photos don't keep time, they keep breath, whispered the unseen storyteller. Listen, and you'll hear what the lungs of paper remember. Lila stood in the dim hallway outside the spare bedroom, one hand on the knob as though the brass were a pulse she needed to confirm. The house was afternoon quiet. Even the refrigerator had settled into a cautious hush. Downstairs, Eve sketched imagined planets, humming that ancestral lullaby like a thread holding the walls together. Layla inhaled dust and lavender-polished scents of surfaces trying to behave, then eased the door open. Sunlight leaked through half-slanted blinds in thin, restless stripes. Against the far wall crouched an old cedar trunk, its lid half open like a mouth surprised mid-sentence. The trunk had traveled through 3 households, her grandmother's Milltown cottage, her mother's renter-worn duplex, now this suburb built on low-interest promises. Each woman had sworn she would organize its contents. Each had handed down the burden instead. She knelt. The wood still carried smoke from a fire that burned out decades ago. Photographs lay inside, loose and curled, stuck together in humid summers, released in brittle winters. She lifted the first stack. Static sparked. Her palm tingled as though the pictures were waking. One Polaroid showed her parents on their wedding day, confetti frozen mid-fall, her father laughing, her mother already glancing sideways, wary of joy arriving too bright. Lila hadn't looked at this image since the funeral. Now, seeing her mother's bouquet bruised against lace, petals already wilting, she understood how early the doubt had opened. She set it aside, reached for another, her own 16th birthday. A strawberry cake, candle smoke coiling around her face. Daniel stood behind her in that frame, cheek pressed to hers, hope simple and loud. She peered closer. Between the white border and the image, a hairline crease ran across their future, invisible until this moment. Behind those came older portraits, sepia-toned, women with severe partings and unsmiling mouths. Lila traced one ancestor's collar, imagining the starch-scraping tender skin. In every generation the eyes looked the same. Guard dogs chained at dusk. A faint breeze rattled the blinds. The stripes of light crawled over her knees. Dust motes danced the slow ballet silence choreographs. She exhaled. These pictures were supposed to reassure her that history followed rules. Instead they pulsed, and she feared they might beat through her fingers if she held them too long. Another envelope surfaced, modern prints from a disposable camera. Eve's first years. The opening shot, Daniel lifting their daughter toward. Pear blossoms, petals raining over them like delicate applause. Leela remembered taking that one, sunscreen sticky on her fingers, laughter bubbling easy as creek water. She had believed the shutter could lock happiness the way amber traps a bee. She had not accounted for time. Beneath the joyful series hid 3 photos she did not recognize: a city skyline at night, a hotel balcony, a half-drunk martini glowing under neon. All were taken from the same vantage, as if someone had leaned against a railing waiting. Her stomach tightened. She flipped the last of the trio. On the back, Daniel had written one word: someday. The word felt like a nail pressed between teeth. She wiped her palms on her jeans, then reached for the final object, a small black digital camera, its battery long dead. A shallow scrape near the lens testified to an old misstep on concrete. She remembered Daniel teaching Eve how to hold it, steady as though it contained water. "Press gently," he had whispered, as if softness were the key to catching memory. Without startling it, she pressed the power button out of habit. Nothing. Somewhere downstairs a drawer closed. Eve's sketchbook thumped. The lullaby changed key minor to major, defiance to hope. Leela found the charger coiled like an abandoned thought and plugged it in. A green light blinked, summoning ghosts toward the screen. While it charged, she leafed through more photos, but images blurred. Her focus snagged on the camera's slow pulse. 40 minutes, an hour she could wait. Waiting had been half her marriage. She sat against the wall, knees drawn up, listening to the house reinsure itself with creaks and thermal sighs. The charger light finally turned solid. She powered the camera. The screen flickered, then opened its eye. 327 images. She scrolled. From earliest Eve's infant yawns, first teething pain, Daniel's proud grin shining with 3 a.m. fatigue. The chronology marched through birthdays and small vacations. Her mother in the garden pretending to hate photographs. Then the timeline thinned. Eve's 8-year-old braid, a lonely school recital, stray sunsets. Finally, the date stamp leaped to a night 3 months ago. A day Leela remembered only for its silence. Daniel had claimed a staff dinner while she repaired a leaking faucet. Image 291. Daniel on a highway overlook, sunglasses reflecting a companion outside the frame. Image 292. A room service cart, 2 plates, 1 fork missing. Image 293. Daniel asleep against hotel pillows. A woman's bare shoulder visible at the edge of exposure. The ceiling bulb throbbed in her vision. She tasted copper. She zoomed on. The shoulder, a small crescent scar below the collarbone. She remembered the lipstick smear on her wine glass. The hotel receipt humming in her notebook. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed 4, its tone heavy with inevitable endings. Leela rose, camera clutched like proof. Her hand trembled, but her mind went still in ocean moments before storm. She descended quietly. Eve sat on the rug, arranging planets in chalk on black paper. At the center burned a sun of angry crayon. "Flames, you're done exploring?" Eve asked without looking up. "For now." Lila knelt beside her, the camera hidden behind her thigh. Eve tapped the blue sphere. "Earth needs clouds. Otherwise it looks lonely." Leela brushed a strand of hair from Eve's forehead, smudging a faint salt line, maybe sweat, maybe future tears. "Clouds sound perfect." While Eve searched for a white pastel, Lila slid the camera into the drawer beneath the coffee table, a place Eve seldom opened. She would need time to decide what to do with the images, burn them, print them, present them like subpoenas. For the first time, she felt her own spine echo the women in the photographs, endurance edged with iron. They sprinkled chalk dust over the blue planet. White swirls formed hurricanes and tenderness. Eve laughed, pleased that storms could be beautiful from far away. The sound lanced Leela's heart, sweet and painful. She thought of the unknown woman's scar moon guiding betrayal by night, Somewhere that woman might be laughing too, chalking dreams on another floor. Footsteps sounded on the porch. The doorknob rattled once Daniel's test for unlocked faith. Leela's breath congealed. Eve's eyes lit sunrise trapped in green. Leela wiped her hands on her jeans. A cloud of chalk floated, then settled like truce dust. Daniel entered with grocery bags, and the easy smile of a man succeeding at ordinary. I brought dinner stuff, thought we'd make tacos. He kissed Eve's crown. She squealed. His lips grazed Leela's cheek too swift, barely memory. The perfume was stronger now, spiced with adrenaline. He unloaded peppers and cilantro. Good day. Colorful, Lila said, snapping the chalk box shut like a swallowed response. Daniel glanced at the closed drawer. Just once, but enough to spark caution in her gut. Had he noticed the camera missing from its shelf? His shoulders stiffened. Can we talk? Later, she smiled. Earth needs clouds. Was it relief or fear that softened his face? He turned to the sink, whistling off-key. Water rushed, chasing the faucet's older drip. Lila thought of her mother's blistered wrists and wondered whether any ancestor had broken the pattern or only learned to whistle through it. Eve hummed again, the lullaby slower now, like a record winding down. Leela looked at her daughter and saw both past and future wearing the same fragile skin. The trunk of secrets would end here, even if she had to burn cedar and photographs alike. Daniel called. Where's the cumin? I can't find anything. In the spice drawer, behind the cinnamon. She walked toward him, each step measuring what remained of the floor. As she passed the coffee table, the drawer hummed in her periphery, the camera, the breathing photographs, the scar alive with every stored heartbeat. She kept walking, but her fingertips brushed the tabletop, a promise to return. When she reached Daniel, he held the cumin jar, lit off, aroma rising like desert wind. Their eyes met. For a moment he searched her face for weatherstorm, drought, or mercy. She offered only the still between match and flame. He opened his mouth, perhaps to confess, perhaps to deny. Leela set her palm on the counter, fingers splayed 5 silent boundaries. Later, she repeated, softer, heavier. He nodded, throat working. The faucet hissed. Steam ghosted upward, blurring the window, framing the setting sun. In the living room, Eve blew gently across her chalk planets. Colored dust lifted, caught orange light, then drifted down like spare seconds returning to Earth. Lila turned from Daniel, from steam, from cumin. She knelt beside Eve and whispered, let's give Saturn some rings. They circled the planet with gold glitter, sealing the universe in shimmer, expected to outlast evening. Daniel lingered at the threshold, grocery bag rustling in his grip. He inhaled to speak, but the sound folded inward, unfinished. In the pause that followed, the drawer breathed. The camera's red light blinked once, releasing evidence that lingered like perfume stitched into old clothes. Drawers remember the hands that open them, murmured the dusk voice. Pull gently, and they will tell you who has been reaching in. The dark, Leela moved through the after-supper hush the way smoke moves through beanlight, slow, uncertain, smelling its own ending. Eve had padded upstairs with chalk-flecked fingers and a vow to brush her teeth. Daniel clattered pans at the sink, forcing conversation with water. He hummed a jittery counterfeit of cheer while soap suds frothed like excuses. She wiped the counter, one circular pass, then another, cloth dragging across laminate already clean. A single drawer near her hip refused to shut. Earlier she had blamed a rogue spatula, but now, alone with tomorrow's dread, it felt personal. The gap was narrow, enough to breathe but not to forget. She pressed. The slider groaned and sprang. Back the width of a confession. Daniel's hum drifted off. I'll fix that, he offered without turning. It's fine, she answered, though fine was a word worn thin as old denim. He dried his hands, kissed her hairline peppermint balm, and distance, then headed for his study, the door closing with the hush of a man training a secret to stay. His steps vanished, but the citrus chemical plume of his new cologne lingered, the scent he never wore before the hotel nights. Lila stared at the drawer. Its shadow, slanted by ceiling light, looked like a mouth swollen from biting back truth. She tugged it open fully, utensils rattled. Beneath the tangle of ladles lay a plastic voice recorder, palm-small red record button dulled by thumbprints. She plucked it out. The drawer slid forward again, as though hungry for the device. She shut it. It reopened, persistent. A heartbeat later she left it ajar to keep the room breathing, she thought. She turned the recorder over. A faded cartoon. Sticker still clung to the back. A moon in a knit cap, smiling. Eve had chosen it when she was 3. Back then, Daniel had filled the memory card with Lullaby's soft guitar, ocean apps, his own whispered stories of brave rabbits crossing meadows. During night feeds, Lila would replay them so she could close her eyes for 90 seconds, while Eve's lashes fluttered toward sleep. The sticker's edge was peeled, revealing a scratch shaped like a crescent scar, same geometry as the mark on the woman's shoulder in the secret photographs. Lila traced it, pulse thrumming in her ears. If the camera had shown what Daniel did, maybe the recorder would tell why. She pressed power. A green light blinked awake, timid. Menu arrows scrolled through file names. 001 Hush Little Baby, 002. Rainforest Loop, 003, untitled. The sequence leaping years until 112, untitled, 113, untitled. The timestamp on 113 read last night, 1:14 a.m. when Daniel said he'd run for cough drops. The room contracted. The refrigerator motor kicked on, then faltered, like someone inhaling to speak but losing courage. Lila clicked play on an earlier file, first something safe. His voice emerged, younger, yawning a story about a lighthouse that refused to blink so ships would stay. She almost smiled. The tenderness felt counterfeit now, yet the past vibrated fresh in her ribs. She skipped forward. File 109 crackled open. Daniel, low-voiced, hurried. Testing, okay, no names. He exhaled. A woman's laugh rustled, husky, not Eve's future tone, not Lila's history. Start with what you want, the stranger coaxed. Daniel whispered, I want a place. No one can trace. I want freedom. Static swallowed the rest. Lila thumbed stop before her lungs betrayed sound. She set the recorder on the counter beside a lipstick-stained wine glass forgotten from yesterday. The burgundy print curved like a question. Who else had tasted this rim? She hadn't worn that. Shade in months. Her reflection in the microwave door looked blurred, edges dissolving, as though the house hadn't chosen whether to keep her. She remembered her mother during the year of discovery, standing at their sink, wedding band removed, talking only to dishes. The memory tasted like metal. Was lineage just repetition, each generation chiseling the same wound into new wood? Would the drawer? It nudged her hip, still open by a sliver. Lila pushed it again. It rebounded. Something in its track stuck, demanding attention. She crouched, removed spoons, measuring cups, the pastry roller with a crack down its handle. At the very back, a folded receipt lodged sideways, swollen from moisture. She pried it free. The Harbor Lantern Inn, room 305 yesterday. Under notes. Recorder drop. Her fingers went numb. So the drawer hadn't jammed. It had guarded contraband. She slid the receipt into her pocket, next to the hotel bill from days before. Paper blades. Aligning. Eve patted back down the stairs, ponytail damp from a too-quick rinse. Mama, can I have the purple blanket? It smells like campfire. Campfire cedar. Trunk memory. Lila mustered a smile. Of course. She tucked the recorder into her sweater sleeve, hiding it like a fragile pulse, then followed Eve to the linen closet. The child's small hands chose blanket, stuffed rabbit, innocence. As Eve climbed back up, her lullaby drifted a hum laced. with minor thirds, the melody of women bracing doors, with Eve safe and visible. Layla returned to the kitchen, shut the door to Daniel's study softly. She stood in the only light left, the over-sink, bulb flickering an exhaustion dot. She inhaled once and pressed play on file 113, ambient air first. Distant traffic, muffled elevator ding, then the stranger, breathless. Did she notice? Daniel's reply came slow, heavy with whiskey or remorse. She notices everything and says nothing. That's the danger. Stranger, maybe she wants out as much as you. Sometimes silence is permission. Daniel, you don't know Layla. Her silence builds teeth. The words carved her, yet strange pride throbbed too. He had at least feared the fortress he built inside her. She listened, stranger, then we hurry. I booked the cottage for July. Keys under the sea glass jar. We'll record a goodbye for her kindness, right? Daniel, kindness, yes, not cruelty. A bottle clinked, liquid poured. Daniel sighed. I've loved her as long as I could. Pause. Stranger's voice softened, almost pitying. Say her name. Let it go. Silence. Then Daniel, tremor thin, Layla. Click recording, ended. In the kitchen present. The fridge rattled back to life. She rewound 5 seconds, replayed the name, Layla. He spoke it like laying down a weapon he still needed. She slid down the cabinet until tile cooled her spine. July, cottage, kindness. Goodbye spun around her like gnats over fruit. They were planning an exit disguised as mercy. And he stored the evidence in a drawer he couldn't quite close. Subconscious sabotage. Maybe hope she would find it and choose the battleground. A floorboard creaked overhead. Daniel moving toward Eve's room, fatherly. The recorder felt hot. She imagined walking up now, pressing play at his doorway, letting his own treacheries echo against bedtime storybooks. But battles won too early risked ruins, and she needed architecture lawyers, bank keys, guardianship papers tucked among vaccination records. Silence could indeed grow teeth. She would feed it patience. She rose, knees protesting. The drawer gaped like a wound. She placed the recorder back, but not buried front row, visible the next time Daniel sought a spatula. Then she added the receipt, folded once. She pushed. Again it stuck, perfect. A reminder hanging half open, breathing. Accusation. From the hallway Daniel called. Layla, you okay? Just a drawer, she answered, voice steady as unbroken glass. She wiped the wine glass clean, rubbing until no lipstick shone, then set it upside down sterile, waiting. He descended. At the threshold he paused, taking in her calm, the stubborn drawer, the empty counter. Need help? She dried her hands on the dish towel, noticing for the first time a small white scar along his thumb, the same thumb that pressed the red button. He hadn't had that scar last spring. She catalogued it, evidence living on skin. It'll hold for now, she sighed. She almost touched the scar, almost asked where it came from, but questions needed staging. Instead she reached past him, switched off the harsh light. Shadows draped the room, gentle as threat. Daniel exhaled, perhaps relieved, perhaps wary. He brushed her shoulder, then walked to the fridge for a late-night orange, pretending hunger. The seal hissed. Citrus scent mingled with cedar memory and new cologne. Layla stepped into the hall. Behind her the drawer nudged, wood on metal, as though applauding the decision she hadn't yet spoken. She let it. Some doors declare war. Some drawers whisper sieges. She climbed the stairs, each riser ticking like a timer. At the landing, she looked back once. The kitchen lay in half dark, pulses of fridge light blinking like a recorder left running. She imagined July sea glass jars, cottages, and goodbye tracks floating across salt air, and saw herself there first, changing locks, seeding every room with her unspoken name. From below, the drawer shivered, refusing again to shut, breathing. her secret rage into the house's bones, soft but endless, like perfume on old clothes. Night is a tape recorder that forgets to stop. Breathed the hush between walls. The clock hands quivered at 2:16 when Lila woke. Moonlight, blunt, cut across the bedspread, spelling bars on Daniel's sleeping back. His breathing came in curt puffs, dreamless. The cologne he had worn to dinner was now only a metallic echo around his throat. She eased free of the sheet, bare feet searching for the floor's honesty, and crossed the hallway with the practiced weightlessness of someone used to dodging creaks that complain. Downstairs, the house had turned courtroom, every doorway a closed. Gallery, every appliance holding its testimony in hums. She opened the stubborn drawer. It yielded tonight, tame because it had already surrendered its secrets. The red recorder lay where she'd left it, green light flickering like an anxious eyelid. She slipped earbuds in, one for the evidence, one for protection from it, and padded to the pantry, the only room whose wooden door had a lock. Inside smelled of onion skins, stale cereal, cedar planks meant to scare moths. She sat on the step stool, knees touching flour tins, and pressed play on file 128, the most recent. Static frothed, then Daniel's whisper, "She's asleep." "I have 5 minutes." A woman answered, voice low as unlit candles. "Tell it clean," Daniel inhaled. "Her name is Iris. She's 3. I see her when I travel to Portland. She thinks I'm her uncle." Silence ballooned, thick as dough, proving. "You could change that," the woman said. "Daniel, I record these so I can say it at least once without lying." Woman, confession as rehearsal. "Daniel, exactly." He sucked air. "I was empty. Business trips gave me echo rooms. Then Iris' mother filled them. Now I don't know which life is the echo. A thump, perhaps a glass set down too hard. Woman again, pick one life before they both starve." The file ended in truncated breath. Lila removed the earbuds. Darkness pressed the pantry walls inward, as if secrets carried gravity. She thought of Eve at 3 cheeks full of letters. She hadn't learned to speak, eyes buoyant with the certainty of being the only child orbiting their household sun. She pictured another toddler now, far away, maybe hugging a rabbit stitched from airport gift shop fabric, waiting for an uncle who smelled of airline soap. Rage rose, but came laced with a clear, strategic calm, as though the mind had broken a fever and could suddenly see the work ahead. Lawyers, custody lines, the arithmetic of betrayal recalculated into leverage. She slipped the recorder into her sweater pocket. The plastic was fever dash, warm. Outside the pantry door, the refrigerator clicked off, granting a hush too complete. She crept back to the kitchen, poured water to swallow the dryness. In the window, her reflection doubled, the ghost of a woman collating futures. She lifted the glass, noticed a faint lipstick crescent, cleaned but not conquered. Under the right angle it gleamed like hidden ink. Evidence everywhere, if the light angled honest. A floorboard above, groaned Daniel, turning. Another groan, smaller. Eve shifting. Leila set the glass down, steadied her breathing the way her mother had before reading eviction notices, slow and queenly, so no one smelled fear. She walked to the living room, slid open the cedar trunk, nudged blankets aside, and hid the recorder beneath her grandmother's hymn book. Layers of memory muffled the device. Still she felt it beating. She returned to the kitchen, wiped the drawer's track with mineral oil so it would glide in the morning, a courtesy that would look like care, but was only strategy disguised as habit. Then she perched on a stool, elbows on counter, listening to the invisible jury of appliances deliberate. Her eyes adjusted. Outlines turned sharper, the way truth sharpens once named. Memory invited itself. The first night after Eve's birth, when Daniel played whale song on that recorder, pacing while Lila dozed, milk damp, certain of safety. He had believed fatherhood was soundproof. He had tested its walls, found an echo he liked better. Stairs creaked. She straightened as Daniel descended wearing the robe she bought last Christmas. He froze at the threshold, perhaps sensing shifted air. "You're up." His voice slurred. "With sleep and something else. Guilt tastes like cotton." She folded hands around a mug she hadn't filled. Couldn't rest. He nodded, opened the fridge, stared at light. "You okay?" he asked, eyes on milk like it held prophecy. "Just thinking." She sipped nothing. He waited, then closed the fridge, returned upstairs. Robe whispering retreat. As soon as his door clicked, she exhaled, releasing nothing of her plan. 3 a.m. crawled in. Night rearranged objects into silhouettes of testimony. Leela retrieved the recorder once more. One last file, 129. Play. No voices. Instead, footsteps on gravel, car door, engine idling. Then Daniel spoke alone. "Someday I will explain every mile, every hotel soap, every lie. Maybe she'll believe me." Maybe believing doesn't matter. The recorder tumbled, muffling him. Distant waves suggested sea. Final sentence, half drowned. "Iris, remember to breathe for me." Click. She deleted nothing. Evidence breathes better unaltered. Footfall on the stairs again, small, not Daniel. Leela tucked the recorder behind her back just as Eve appeared. Hair a midnight tied around her shoulders, stuffed rabbit dangling. "Mom?" The girl rubbed one eye, then looked past Leela to the dim countertop as though shadows spelled things. Lila managed to smile. "Nightmare?" Eve shook her head. "I heard talking." Lila's pulse skipped. Perhaps earbuds leaked. She gestured to the hallway. Must have been the radio next door. Eve stepped closer, gaze sharpening with preteen. "Intuition. Your face is loud," she whispered. Lila swallowed. "Come, we'll make warm milk." She guided Eve to the stove, but the child's eyes snagged on something shining, Daniel's phone. Forgotten near the fruit bowl, screen lit with a paused message thread. A tiny avatar, baby girl curled in a blanket, cheeks like petals. Text. Preview. She asked for the uncle again. "When will screen dimmed?" Eve reached, but Lila whisked the phone away, too quick. The gesture punctured trust. She felt the air thin. "Why is there a baby?" Eve asked. Lila set the phone upside down. Buying seconds. Night seemed suddenly crowded with all the answers she couldn't give yet. "Moms can't lie," Eve said, quoting an old promise from third-grade homework. Lila knelt so their eyes met. "Sometimes moms need the right dawn for hard truths." Eve frowned, processing metaphor. "Is she sick? The baby?" Leela shook her head. "No, just across the map." Eve's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her pupils still sought corners for monsters. Lila stroked her hair. Chalk dust from earlier still hid in streaks. "Let's drink milk and forget dark thoughts," Leela suggested. "Okay," Eve agreed. Though the word landed crooked, Lila warmed milk, stirring honey until it dissolved like secrets fading to sweetness. Eve watched the swirl. "Will I ever meet her?" she blurted. Leila froze. "Meet who?" Eve shrugged, embarrassed by intuition, but persisted. "The baby." Lila handed her the mug, hand steady only by will. "Someday everything will sort itself," she said, meaningless as steam, but Eve nodded. "Accept in comfort, even if it didn't parse." They sat at the table, moonlight turning the wood silver. The recorder thumped in Leela's sweater like a second heart, and she wondered if Eve could hear it. The girl finished half the mug, eyelids drooping. "Back to bed," Leela urged. As they climbed, the hallway seemed lengthened, doors on either side like silent jurors. She tucked Eve in, kissed her forehead, lingered until breathing deepened. Lila returned to the hall, pulled the attic cord, and slid the recorder into a shoebox of tax returns, safe, unsuspicious. She replaced the ceiling panel and whispered to insulation, "Hold this for me." On the landing, she paused outside the master bedroom. Daniel snored softly. She turned toward her sewing nook instead. A room of fabric and pins. Plans grow well among needles. She opened her notebook, wrote dates, passwords, names of attorneys recommended by a neighbor during last year's block party divorce gossip. At the bottom she drew 2 columns: Eve, Iris, and under Eve she wrote everything, under Iris, almost everything. She closed the book, satisfied by directive. A floorboard behind her groaned. She pivoted. Eve stood in the doorway, blanket like a cape, eyes wide but calm. In her hand she held the lipstick-stained wineglass she must have fetched while Lila wrote, the ghost crescent gleaming accusatory. "Mom," she began, voice thin with night, "who's my sister?" Dust to dust, the knave breathed, and secrets weighed more than stone. Lila slipped into the third pew from the back just as the first hymn drained into silence. Evening light from stained glass saints sifted lavender over the congregation, softening every edge except the one inside her chest. Around her the air smelled of candle wax, wilted palm leaves ground to ash, and the faint cologne that still clung to the coat she wore because Daniel had not asked for it back, the priest's black. Shoes crossed the chancel, slow as a second hand. "Remember you are dust," his voice droned, "and to dust you shall return." He dipped thumb to ash bowl, traced charcoal crosses on bowed foreheads, marking exits, not absolutions. Rose shifted forward like a river accepting stones. Layla waited, counting the lies she could name, the Portland flights, the rented cottage, the scar on the stranger's shoulder, the baby named Iris. 4 more hid under waterline memory. She would light candles for them all. Eve sat beside her, small in a navy jumper, fingers threaded through the silver locket. Daniel had begged to join them, playing at family devotion. Layla had said yes because war allowed reconnaissance. Now he was late, claiming traffic always some invisible tangle he alone could solve. The line shortened. Layla felt Eve watching the ashes smear across brow after brow. "Does it hurt?" The girl whispered. "It only reminds," Layla answered. Voice wrapped in wool so anger would not show. When their turn came, Eve stepped first. The priest's thumb, blackened, stroked her pale skin. Dust flecked the child's lashes. She blinked but did not flinch. Layla followed. The ash was cool, gritty, smelling of burned hymns. She thought of Daniel's recorded confession, how each word had tasted like soot in her ears. The priest's gaze paused on her longer than courtesy required, as if sensing embers. She offered no flame. They retreated to their pew. Eve traced the chalk-gray cross on Lila's forehead, curiosity pulling her thumb away soot-stained. Lila kissed her fingertips, tasting char and innocence. The sermon began. Father Alder spoke of forgiveness as a slow thaw. Grace is a winter river that forgets the shape of ice. His cadence, honeyed, slid under ribs where memory bruised. "Forgive," he urged, "because resentment calcifies the heart." Lila glanced. At the votive stand beside the altar rows of glass cups waiting for fire, like soldiers awaiting orders. She imagined lighting one for each deception, watching wax liquefy into confession. "Forgive," the priest repeated, "not because the sinner deserves it, but because you deserve the unchaining." Heat bloomed behind Lila's sternum, rage or release. She could not tell. Her mother had taught her to forgive fast and shallow. Like wiping rain from a window. You still see the storm, but blame looks cleaner. Lila felt the old lesson cracking. The hymn after the homily rose low minor chords, a plea for mercy. While the notes floated, Lila guided Eve toward the candles. She dropped a quarter into the iron box. Coins clinked like brittle amen. She struck a match. One flame for the lie of business dinners that stretched till dawn. Second flame for the hotel receipts. Third flame for the shoulder scar. Fourth flame for Iris, breathing 3 states away, cradling Daniel's unfinished love. She paused, match burning close to skin. Years ago, before marriage curled in on itself, She and Daniel had come on another Ash Wednesday, wrists entwined like promise cords. Back then he had pressed the ash to her brow himself after Mass, laughing that if they were dust he wanted to be the speck beside her. They had gone for pancakes, smeared syrup on each other's noses, and told the waitress they were practicing forgiveness in advance so they would never need it. The memory surfaced now, sugar bright and bladed. She felt it split against her ribs inside her, as a spoon through honey, then melt into quiet. A rustle at the rear. Daniel slipped through the doors, hair wind-tousled, tie crooked like a deed undone. He scanned pews, found them at the altar rail, and offered a guilty smile no one returned. He moved down the aisle with exaggerated reverence, as though humility could erase lateness. Eve tugged Leela's sleeve. "Daddy's here." Leela nodded, lips pressed thin. Daniel genuflected, joined them before the sixth candle. He reached for the wooden taper, but she covered the box of matches with her palm, the gesture small, decisive. His hand hovered, then withdrew. Communion began. Bells chimed, delicate, yet each peal felt like a hammer. Eve stayed seated too. "Young for bread of sorrow," she insisted. Leela rose. Daniel stepped behind her, procession forcing them shoulder to shoulder. From the loft, an unseen soprano breathed the Kyrie, voice as raw as confession scrawled in midnight ink. At the rail Lila knelt. The priest laid the wafer on her tongue, cool as coin. She closed her eyes. Flash, Daniel in hotel sheets, telling Iris to breathe for him. Flash, the recorder's blinking light buried in a shoebox above their ceiling. Body of Christ, blood of Christ, body of lies. She swallowed. Next to her Daniel bowed his head. The priest pressed wafer to his palm. Daniel's lips moved prayer or rehearsal. Lila watched his shoulders. They trembled once, then stilled. She imagined the words, "Forgive me, spare me." Only me. Back at the pew Daniel sank to his knees, forearms on the rail, eyes shut tight. His lips shaped a litany, silent but urgent. Leela remained standing. The congregation's collective murmur swelled, a tide of need. Candles flickered in drafts, halos unsteady. She studied her husband, the new scar on his thumb, the ash cross blurring with sweat. His devotion looked real. She reminded herself that acting was easiest on one's knees. Eve leaned against Lila's hip, whispering, "Why is Daddy crying?" A faint shine wet Daniel's lashes. Lila brushed Eve's hair. "He has things to think about." The final hymn began, "Just as I am," an open-ended surrender. Parishioners rose, voices quavering. Daniel remained kneeling, as if glued by private guilt. Layla sang low, every note weighing like a suitcase she might soon unpack in court. "Forgive," the melody urged. "Forget," the melody did not dare. When the hymn ended, people flowed toward exits, coats rustling like dried leaves. Layla guided Eve to the baptismal font. The water, moonlit, trembled at their approach. Eve dipped a finger, traced circles until ripples erased reflection. "Will the ashes wash off?" she asked. "After they teach us what they know," Lila said, hearing her own voice as prophecy. Behind them, Daniel's shoes tapped closer, then stopped. She smelled his cologne pine over iron. "Lila," he whispered, "pray with me." He reached for her hand. She turned, but not to him too. The votives where 5 flames now burned. Someone had lit the 6th. Wax on its rim glistened. She imagined the unknown worshiper granting mercy for reasons she would never learn. "Grace moves independent," the priest had said. "But so does reckoning." Daniel's hand hovered, waiting. Lila lifted Eve into her arms. Ashes flaking onto the child's jumper like gray snow. Over Eve's shoulder she met Daniel's gaze, his pupils wide, pleading. Gently she lowered to her knees beside him. Relief flashed across his face, quick as matchstrike. He folded hands. Bowed, she folded none. Instead, she counted the movement of his mouth, measuring syllables for signs of contrition. The sanctuary quieted. Lights dimmed to dusk gold. In that hush, Daniel prayed aloud, barely audible. Lord, heal the harm I've done. Grant me courage to be whole. Not us dash me dot, each word chipped at the thin wall between them. Lila felt Eve's heartbeat against her own. Her arms tightened, the locket pressed between them, unopened as ever. She thought of Iris's tiny ribs rising somewhere, unseen, breathing the hush of another bedtime. 2 children, 1 prayer. Each word chipped at the thin wall between them. Lila felt Eve's heartbeat against her own. Her arms tightened, the locket pressed between them, unopened as ever. She thought of Iris's tiny ribs rising somewhere unseen, breathing the hush of another bedtime. 2 children, 1 prayer. Daniel finished, exhaled, and turned his ash-marked face toward her, expecting, what? Absolution, maybe. Layla's stare held him, neither soft nor cruel. She touched the pew rail, felt grooves worn by decades of knuckles. Pleading mercy. She understood now. Forgiveness was not the opposite of justice. Sometimes it was its lantern, illuminating where the blade should fall. Footsteps echoed in the nave, the priest securing side doors. Candles guttered, casting long, feathery shadows across Daniel's kneeling form. Lila rose, Eve in her arms, and stepped back. Daniel remained, head bowed, praying still, but to a God who could hear only the one voice speaking. Lila waited until his whisper faded, until the final candle hissed out, and even the incense smelled like tinder. Then she turned toward the aisle, carrying Ash, fragile child, and unlit matches, leaving Daniel to the silence he called holy silence that clung, acrid and intimate, like perfume on old clothes. Storms don't break houses, they name the cracks. Thunder rolled across the valley, like a summons. Lila stood beneath the warped eaves of the farmhouse porch, watching rain braid itself into silver ropes beyond the wicker screen. Lightning flared. For an instant the house glowed transparent, every beam and nail visible, the way X-rays revealed damage hidden by skin. Behind her the screen door creaked. Daniel stepped out, phone still in his palm. Suit jacket darkened at the shoulders where the storm had touched him. Eve was at her friend's overnight party. Safe from the weather tonight, would blow through. Their family. Layla set the envelope on the porch table, a manila rectangle heavy, with signatures and certified intent. The wind riffled its flap like a breath readying to speak. Daniel's gaze flicked from the envelope to her face. His mouth opened, closed. You asked me to meet you on the porch, he said, voice pitched between plea and rehearsal. I wanted the house to hear, she answered. These boards remember more than we do. Another flash, his expression caught mid-flinch, ghost-white. Thunder followed, slow applause. Layla pulled the recorder from her coat pocket, thumb grazing the battered cartoon sticker. Last night's confession, she said, setting it beside the envelope. I transcribed every word. Daniel swallowed. Stormlight glinted on the scar. Along his thumb, evidence etched into living skin. You've made up your mind. I've made up 3 generations' minds. Her hand brushed the cedar post where initials had been carved D+L within a heart, once sharp, now softened by time. Grandmother stayed, mother half stayed, I end it. Rain spattered through the screen, freckling the table. He reached for the recorder, then withdrew. Blood repeats, he muttered. My father, I'm built of his mistakes. Perhaps, she said, but scaffolding isn't destiny. Heel to toe, she crossed the porch, each floorboard offering its creak. Like witness testimony. She opened the envelope, slid out the divorce petition. On top lay Eve's crayon drawing. A red heart cracked down the center, 2 stick girls on opposite shores. Eve hadn't known Iris's name. She'd simply labeled one figure me. And the other sister? Daniel's breath hitched. She drew this? Children. Draw weather they can't forecast in words. Lightning forked again. Somewhere across the ridge, an oak split with a sound like cloth ripping. Daniel's shoulders sagged. I never wanted to break her. Then you should have learned how. Not to. Leela folded the drawing back, exposing the blue legal pages beneath. Sign tonight. Spare her this spectacle. Rain slanted, drumming on tin roof. He stared at the pen she offered. You think this ends lineage? It reroutes it, she said. A mother's job. He pressed the pen to paper. Ink bled in damp blotches, his name dissolving before it finished. He tried again, slower, lines shaking. When he set the pen down, he looked older, as if the years he'd borrowed had been repossessed in a moment. Wind gusted. The porch swing clanged against the rail. Daniel reached for her coat sleeve, stopped short. What do I tell Iris when she's old enough to ask? Tell her storms named the cracks, and you chose which beams to mend. Lila gathered the signed pages, slid them into a plastic sleeve. Mist clung to her hair, silvering it. She felt neither triumph nor ruin, just a steady internal quiet, like early snow muffling ground that once shook. Daniel hunched on the swing, hands dangling. You'll keep the house? Until it forgets the old echoes. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Eve deserves a porch that doesn't flinch at thunder. Inside, hallway lamplight pooled on pine floors. She placed the documents in the cedar trunk atop hymn books, a new scripture layered on the old. As she shut the lid, she caught her reflection in the window, ash cross faint, eyes clear. She heard Daniel breathe once, a hitch that could have been prayer or grief. Rain eased to a hush hiss against the gutters. Leela opened the closet, took Daniel's spare coat and hung it on the porch hook, an article without owner, drying slowly. She turned the lock. Daniel remained seated, cradling Eve's cracked heart, drawing against his chest as though paper could warm him. Thunder rumbled. Farther off, gentler now. Lila drifted upstairs toward Eve's empty room, the locket chain on her wrist glinting. She laid a fresh nightlight on the sill, soft amber, stormproof. Downstairs, the porch boards creaked under Daniel's shifting weight. A man learning. How absent sounds. She exhaled, tasting petrichor and the faint ghost of his abandoned cologne. It lingered like perfume on old clothes, but the air kept moving. Echoes hold subpoenas when voices fail. Murmured the padded corridor. Lila stepped off the marble landing into family courtroom 4B, solemn as a library after bomb threat. Carpet. Swallowed footsteps, but the ceiling lights buzzed, announcing each second she owed herself. Her lawyer, Karina Holt, touched her elbow in passing. The gesture felt like flint striking, but saving the spark for later. Rows of pale benches waited. Empty. Only the clerk shuffled papers, smelling of toner and anxiety. At the front, a single microphone tipped toward the witness box, black foam bruised by past confessions. Custody hearing Rowan v. Rowan, the docket read. A subtitle Lila supplied under her breath. Who gets the future? She removed the evidence. Pouch from her satchel, photographs curled at the edges. The voice recorder backed up to a flash drive. The wine-glass lip captured in high-res print, and the stubborn silver locket still unwilling to yield its contents. She placed them in order on the table, like chess pieces that had waited years for daylight. Daniel entered from the side door, escorted by a lawyer who smelled of debt collection and sleek shampoo. Daniel's tie was neat, but the skin below. His eyes sagged, storm-tossed. He saw the locket first, flinched as if it hissed. Then he straightened, practiced humility settling across him like a too-heavy coat. The judge, a woman with iron hair, took the bench. We'll proceed without preliminaries. Her gavel tapped once small thunder. Karina stood. Your Honor, we submit exhibits A through D. Photos slid forward. Daniel in a hotel balcony reflection. The receipt dated 3 days after Eve's last birthday. A screen capture of a message thread with a baby avatar. and a still of Daniel's thumb scar matched to security camera footage from the Harbor Lantern Inn. Evidence, not rage. Daniel's lawyer rose with a smile home to cut silk. Irrelevant timelines, Your Honor. My client concedes infidelity, but parenting ability must be judged in present tense. Infidelity. The word settled like damp ash on teak benches. Lila watched Daniel's hands. They clenched, unclenched. Searching for the pen that used to steady him, the judge nodded once. Then we will judge present tense. Karina pressed play on the recorder. Daniel's own voice filled the hush. Her name is Iris. She thinks I'm her uncle. His whispered rehearsal for desertion. No gasp erupted. Even astonishment respected. Courtroom decorum. But Daniel sagged as though gravity had heard. His lawyer objected, citing privacy. Overruled. A low fluorescent hum settled in like tinnitus. Through the high windows that cut a narrow band beneath the ceiling cornice, late morning sun striped the dust. Each mote drifted as if deciding whose story to land on. The mural behind the bench blindfolded justice, resembled an exhausted mother refusing to watch. Lila remembered standing in her grandmother's kitchen. The afternoon child services removed her cousin. How grown-ups used soft voices to divide a life. The same metallic taste nicked her tongue now. Daniel's counsel straightened his papers. Your Honor, adultery is not abuse. Mr. Rowan's lapse should not sever paternal bonds. Karina countered, voice calm as winter glass. Neglect is not only bruises, it is absence by installment. The judge's eyebrows flicked, absorbing. When Daniel took the stand, he swore an oath, voice a cracked reed. Mr. Rowan, the lawyer coaxed, describe your relationship with your daughter. Daniel glanced at Layla for permission he no longer owned. Eve is my morning, he said. I pack her lunches, sign every permission slip. His lawyer produced photos. Father and daughter at science fair, at Strawberry Patch, at Christmas parade. Leela knew those days. She was behind the lens, capturing love she believed stable. Cross-examination. Karina rose again. Mr. Rowan, how many nights in the last year did you sleep somewhere other than the marital home? Daniel hesitated. Business. Required. A number, please. His throat bobbed. 46. Karina slid the hotel ledger under the document camera. The projector washed the wall with rows of dates, room 217 repeating like a bruise pattern. Rain fluttered in Leela's memory, the porch swing clanging. Daniel's voice grew the texture of weathered rope. I can parent from anywhere, he insisted. From the gallery, a faint cough sounded. As though doubt cleared its throat, Daniel's lawyer rose for redirect, pivoting toward lineage. Mr. Rowan, would you say your own father influenced your worst decisions? Daniel's eyes shone. Yes, he left when I was 8. I swore I'd never vanish like him. Sometimes that fear. Ben's choices. The lawyer faced the bench. Trauma echoes, Your Honor. My client fights shadows, not his. Child. Karina replied before the judge could. Echoes can be broken when someone chooses not to shout back. A ripple of agreement trembled along the benches, the sound quilts of widows and grandmothers, remembering similar rooms. The judge sighed. We have testimony. We need truth. She turned to Leela. Mrs. Rowan, anything further? Lila stood. Her knees wobbled, but the tremor stopped at her waist. Only this. She lifted the locket. Light caught its seam, a thin silver equator. He gave this to Eve when she was 5, promised it would open when we were ready for anything inside. It never opened. She still wears it. She placed it on the clerk's desk. Some promises are sealed so tight they can't breathe. Others leak. She let the words hang, not accusation but autopsy. The judge leaned back, eyes shuttered. The court desires the minor's perspective. Mrs. Rowan, may we hear from your daughter? Karina whispered, we can request chambers only. Lila shook her head. Eve had endured enough rooms that spoke about her but not to her. The bailiff exited. Minutes stretched, brittle as uncooked spaghetti. Daniel sat rigid, thumb tracing his scar. Layla traced the faint ash stain still haunting her own wrist from Ash Wednesday. An ember of resolve. When Eve entered, her footsteps were careful, as if sound itself were fragile. She wore her navy jumper, hair braided, the locket shining at her throat. The judge softened her voice. "Eve, do you understand why you're here?" Eve nodded. "You want to know where I feel safest?" "Yes." The judge smiled. Eve's hands rose to the locket. "Mom says locks open when they're ready." She twisted the clasp absent-mindedly while speaking. "I feel safe where mornings don't lie, where good night happens in the same house as good morning." Daniel's face crumpled. The judge asked, "And where is that?" Eve hesitated. In the hush, the locket clicked soft, decisive. Her eyes widened. So did Leela's. Tiny hinges gave, revealing a photo folded small. Eve on Daniel's shoulders during that long-ago cherry blossom day, petals snowing happiness their future couldn't keep. Somehow the locket had protected the memory until this courtroom breath. The judge waited. Eve slid the photo out, stared, then whispered, "I guess it's here." In the picture where everyone was honest. "I want to live where that could happen." Again, the room exhaled a collective ache. Layla stepped forward, but stopped. Eve's choice needed no prompting. Daniel covered his face. Shoulders shook, pride melting to something almost human. The judge cleared her throat, voice damp. "We'll recess and reconvene for ruling." Gavel tapped. Lawyers gathered documents. Whispers rose like cautious birds. Leela reached Eve, kneeling. "You opened it," she breathed. "I didn't try," Eve answered. "It just listened." Across the aisle Daniel watched, tears tracking Ashcross memory still faint on his brow. No words left him. Only silence, heavy as perfume on old clothes. Courtrooms do not echo, they inhale, and hold the breath of everyone who ever lied there. Lila re-entered 4B when the recess bell finished trembling. Carpeting muffled her steps, but the walnut panels seemed to creak in warning, as if the walls had finally learned syllables sharp enough to speak back. Spectators filtered in, 2 custody veterans with coffee-stained folders, curious attorneys, sniffing fresh ruin. Thunderclouds of whisper blended with fluorescent hum. Then the bailiff's command silenced the gallery and pulled the air tight as drumskin. The judge resumed her bench, robes brushing oak like a closing curtain. "Counsel, you may proceed." Karina Holt rose beside Lila, voice steady as metronome. "Steele, Your Honor, during recess we inspected the locket that opened moments ago. We discovered an additional compartment." Murmurs rippled. Karina lifted a clear evidence bag. Inside lay a thumbnail flash drive, black as confession. Daniel's lawyer objected. Chain of custody, surprise, prejudice. The judge's gavel tapped. 3 measured beats, a heartbeat held to time. "This is a court of equity," she said. "Truth seldom calls ahead." She nodded for playback. A technician slotted the drive into the courtroom console. Screens flickered to life like eyes, shaking off sleep. Audio followed Daniel's voice, richer than the tinny recorder had captured before. Recorded in a quiet hotel room where curtains muttered against a highway vent. "Future Daniel, if you're listening to this, you promised Iris you'd explain the difference between leaving and abandoning. You said Lila would understand once the dust settled. You said losing Eve half the week was worth waking honest." A gasp escaped somewhere behind Lila, perhaps her own throat. The voice continued, cataloging each promise as if beads uncursed. Rosary, monthly checks, secret visits, a birthday attended by uncle until the real story could land gentle. Then, "You'll need courage, remember Dad ran, don't become his echo." The irony was so loud even the ventilation paused. Daniel sat rigid, knuckles white, eyes sinking into themselves. A faint ash-gray ruddiness tinted his cheeks like residue no washing could purge. He whispered toward Leela across the counsel table, "I'm sorry," but the phrase fell short. Stripped of flight, tasting of burned paper before she could even register the sound. Screens went dark. The hush afterward throbbed. Karina laid the locket, now hollow, on the exhibit shelf. Its silver halves yawned like jaws finally emptied of poison. Daniel's attorney rose, coat whispering an apology of its own. "Your Honor," he ventured, "these are thoughts never meant for public hearing, speculative, conditioned on hypothetical futures. They do not prove Mr. Rowan incapable of responsible custody." Karina answered before the judge could breathe. "They prove trajectory. Parenting isn't just present tense, it's path." She placed the wedding photo Eve had hidden inside the locket on the overhead projector. Blossoms drifted around a younger Daniel holding his daughter aloft. Petals looked now like pale ash flinging upward. "Exhibit res ipsa," Karina said. Softly, "The thing speaks for itself." The judge leaned forward, elbows sliding into light. "Mr. Rowan, do you wish to respond?" Daniel rose. His voice was hoarse gravel. "Those recordings were fears spoken in private, Your Honor. Fears, not plans." He glanced at Leela, searching for a shoreline he had burned. He swallowed. "I love my daughter more than my own skin." His gaze flicked to the flash drive, then to the locket halves, and shuddered as though they whispered back, "Love defects in deeds, not declarations." Lightning cracked outside. Window panes shimmered like shaken water. In the brief fluorescence, the faint scar on Daniel's thumb gleamed, a compass that had pointed him away from home. The judge closed her notebook. "I have heard enough argument." Before ruling, she addressed the small figure on the front bench. "Eve Rowan, step forward, please." Eve rose, braids swinging. She walked alone toward authority, shoulders squared the way one squares a blanket. Against cold. Leela's pulse hammered, maternal instinct screaming to shield. Strategic mind insisting truth needed a child's unvarnished timbre. The bailiff guided Eve into the witness chair. Microphone adjusted. It loomed like a dark flower, begging nectar. The judge dipped her voice. "Miss Rowan, you're here because both parents wish to care for you. We must decide how. I know this is difficult." Eve nodded. Tiny fingers found the empty locket halves Karina had set near the rail for scale. She fitted them together then. Apart, metal clicking, a heartbeat made from silver. The gallery held still. "Do you feel comfortable answering questions?" The judge asked. Eve inhaled, exhaled. Then, cheeks flushing, she looked at Daniel. "Daddy, you said secrets were surprise gifts wrapped in quiet. But gifts don't make Mama cry." Daniel's eyes brimmed. Guilt cut like salt. Eve turned to Leela. "Mama, you said walls learn to speak when no one listens." I wrote something, so the walls don't have to remember for us." She reached into her pocket, producing a folded sheet. A purple ribbon ringed it, the same shade as the chalk planets they once drew together. She breathed once more, voice shaking but clear. "May I read my letter now?" Silence answered, solemn, waiting, fragrant with ash that no ventilation could remove. Morning arrived soft as a held breath after days of hammering rain. Lila stepped onto the porch barefoot. The boards still damp, their usual creak muted by swelling grain. Somewhere beneath the steps water trickled, searching for a river that would take its grief away. Across the yard the old flower bed, once a ragged rectangle of mud, sparked with new white lily. Unplanned, unplanted, risen. From bulbs her grandmother had buried so deep even drought had forgotten them. Petals cupped what rain could not drink, brimming like tiny baptismal fonts. She crouched, pressing two fingers to one bloom, harvesting the chill. The petals felt lighter, almost hollow, as though the storm had scooped their insides clean before giving them back. Memory echoed. That night on this same porch, lightning lit Daniel's face the moment his signature blurred beneath wet ink. He had left before sunrise. The swing still swayed sometimes on windless afternoons. An afterimage of wait. Screen door clicked behind her. Eve padded out in rubber boots she refused to retire, mud-flecked stars painted along the toes. The silver locket gleamed at her collar, seams fused again as though the courtroom opening had been only a yawn. She carried a trowel in one hand, a brown paper sack in the other. "Morning Lily are hungry," she said, quoting something Lila's grandmother used to murmur. She knelt and began scooping soil. For every secret told, a lily planted that had become the pact between mother and daughter. First scoop commemorated Daniel's confession about Iris. Second honored Lila's own admission that she once thought of leaving when Eve was a baby. And Colic's scream split her nights. Secrets did not shrink when unearthed. They changed texture, like clay that dries into something you can build with. Lila stood, toes tingling in cold earth. She glanced toward the driveway empty, except for tire grooves still holding yesterday's water. She exhaled into her palms. Checked the mailbox by impulse. Nothing yet. Good. Today's miracle would be small and domestic. Inside. The kitchen smelled of nothing, drawers aligned, counters scrubbed, skillet hung polished. Too clean, too quiet. She lifted the loose floorboard near the stove and drew out a cloth-wrapped bundle, her maiden recipe book, bound in cracked red leather, edges freckled by cinnamon. She hadn't opened it since the first year of marriage, when Daniel found store-bought sauce charmingly efficient. Now she untied the ribbon. Pages whispered. Thin handwriting, her mother's, her aunt's, her own teenage scrawl rose like fugitive perfume. She settled on the buttermilk lily cake, a page bookmarked with a pressed petal from another spring. In margin her grandmother had written, "Bloom where storms forget they were storms." Lila set a bowl on the counter, measured flour with reverent slowness. Each scoop felt declarative. "This is mine." Sugar followed, salt, baking powder. She cracked eggs, watched yolks spread like dawn across a small sky. As batter thickened, the house inhaled a faint vanilla exhale drifting through the hall, nudging. Doors. The oven clicked awake. Outside, Eve planted her third lily. Lila peeked through window glass smudged by earlier rain. Sunlight angled through retreating clouds, turning puddles into sudden mirrors. Eve wiped her brow with the back of a muddy wrist and grinned, gap-toothed boldness returning after weeks of tight-lipped vigil. Lila poured batter into pans. The new stove, a warranty gift from herself, kept steady heat, no sputter, no protest. She slid pans inside, closed the door gently as one tucks a letter into an envelope she is finally ready to send. Steam beaded the window. For a moment, reflection. Overlaid lily beds outside, kitchens inside, until they looked like one realm. She set the timer, washed bowls. Running water hummed lullaby cadence, reminding her of a night Daniel once recorded whale song to keep Eve asleep while he answered texts in another room. That memory no longer cut. It only ranged by like distant thunder. Timer dinged. Cakes rose. Golden, their domes cracking slightly, releasing shy sugar breath. She placed them on the rack, let the scent drift coaxingly toward the yard. Within minutes, Eve pushed open the door, cheeks dewy. "You baked," she said. Statement of awe. Mud clung to her knees. She leaned close, inhaled. "Smells like birthday without the calendar." "Smells like new days," Lila corrected softly. She handed the child a damp cloth, wiped mud from boots, then produced a glass jar of candied lemon slices. Eve's eyes widened. Sunshine candy. Another recipe resurrected. They assembled frosting, cream cheese, citrus zest, patience. Eve sprinkled zest with ceremonious pinches as though blessing dough. Lila spread icing across layers, smoothing ridges. When done, the cake resembled a pale hill at dawn, flecked. With tiny gold confetti, they carried it to the porch table. Air still shimmered with post-rain ions. Layla cut 2 slices, thick and reassuring. Crumbs fell like soft verdicts. They ate in silence, fork tines clinking. The cake wasn't perfect edges. Too crisp, but it tasted of place that refuses to be exile. Wind shifted. Fence chimes rattled. Daniel had left them behind, and from the corner of the yard, a cardinal darted to the loquat tree, red punctuation against after-storm green. Eve pointed. Grandma said cardinals mean someone's visiting. Leela swallowed. Crumb. Then we welcomed them with crumbs and quiet. They set a small piece on the porch rail. The bird cocked its head, considering, then hopped closer. Eve sipped milk, satisfied. 3 lily are in. We still have more. She patted the sack. How many secrets till soil is full? As many as truth wants breath, Leela said. She reached, brushed a stray hair from Eve's temple, felt the child lean into the touch more quickly than before. Healing lived in those milliseconds. Mid-afternoon sun stretched long, painting porch boards with stripes. Leela fetched a broom. Swept away splinters of bark the storm had peeled from Eve's. Each stroke felt less like erasure and more like preparation for something unnamed. Mail truck engine coughed at the bend. Both heads lifted habit. The truck rolled to a stop, brake squealing. A red flag dropped. The mailman waved, knowing due. Stay clear of muddy ruts. Lila walked barefoot across damp grass, air cool between toes. She lifted the box lid. A water bill, a seed catalog, and a cream envelope edged in sunset orange crayon swirl. No return address, but the postmark read, Willamette Valley, Oregon. Her pulse whispered Iris even before her brain lined the letters. She held the envelope by its corners, as if temperature might reveal intention. Eve bounced beside her, sack of bulbs rustling. Anything good? Leela tucked the envelope behind the seed catalog. Just promises of flowers, she said. Not. A lie. Promises were seeds too. They returned to porch. Eve resumed planting. The sun began its slow drop, lighting each lily so bright the petals seemed to glow from inside. Lila watched, envelope warming in her palm. She imagined a child with Daniel's eyes and a different lullaby sleeping somewhere. It was still morning. She imagined that child tracing crayons across paper, writing a hope that might travel miles to arrive unsure of welcome. She slid the envelope under the plate that held the remaining cake, a weightless secret waiting its hour. Then she took the trowel, kneeled beside her daughter, and planted bulb number 4, this one for the letter still sealed. Soil closed over promise. Together they patted the mound, leaving a small indentation to collect evening dew. Somewhere overhead, swallows stitched the sky back together with quick, silent arcs. Inside the house, the timer beeped for nothing, reminding her the oven was cooling. Muscle memory of waking heat and letting go. She would write Iris when the moon climbed high. Maybe send a slice of cake recipe on lined paper. Maybe invite her to plant lily of her own. But for now, earth smelled of rain speaking. Secrets and sugar courage. The porch swing creaked, though no one sat. Perhaps the storm's ghost accepted cake crumbs left behind. Layla brushed soil from her knees, lifted her face to late light, exhaling until new air filled the room's even walls had stopped guarding. Eve tugged her sleeve. Mom, what color will tomorrow's lily be? Whatever color forgiveness looks. Under morning, she answered. They sat side by side on the step, watching puddles evaporate in slow silver sighs. Until the porch light flickered on, scattering moths like soft applause, and the unopened envelope rested quietly waiting, fragrant as perfume on old clothes. The museum opened before the river woke, so Eve walked there alone, following the scent of morning bakeries and whetstone. The converted granary crouched at the edge of town, windows tall as ambitions once stored there. Inside, climate-controlled air smelled faintly of linen and distant flowers like pages pressed around petals. Too fragile for weather. Eve moved through hushed corridors, past display cases vibrating with other people's salvaged histories, a seamstress's thimble, a miner's canary cage, a war bride's telegram that arrived 10 days after her husband did not. Each artifact, Felt like an inhale paused mid-sentence. She stopped at the newest exhibit, reconstituted hearts, objects of repair. A single spotlight, powdered glass and dust, motes over a small platform. There sat the silver locket, forever open now halves, spread like a patient book. Inside, the folded cherry blossom photograph rested beside a brass plate etched with two lines, Eve Rowan and Iris Miles. 2006, donated by the family's 2038. Eve leaned close. Reflections wavered her own, then Layla's younger features fused over. Memories surface, then Iris's faint grin. At last Daniel's outline surfaced, softer than she expected, like a shadow cast through gauze. She did not flinch. Absence had worn its edges smooth. She touched the glass with two fingers, greeting rather than summoning. The locket's hinge, repaired once, still bore a hairline scar, a reminder that openings cost metal something. Footsteps. Approached, purposeful whisper of museum staff shoes. A docent paused beside her, nodding a polite hello. "We polished it only lightly," he said, voice careful not to echo. "Patma tells the journey." Eve smiled, appreciating the restraint. Too much shine can erase survival's handwriting. She moved on to the adjacent case. Beneath cool lights lay her mother's red leather recipe book, the one that used to live under a loose floorboard. Its spine had been rebound. Title gilded in modest script, "Lily After Storms," a kitchen memoir. The open spread displayed two facing pages. Left, buttermilk lily cake recipe, margins crowded by different generations' notes. Right, a photograph of Lila, gray-haired now, cupping a slice near her chin. Crumbs bright against dark sweater, eyes laughing. Under the photo, healing tastes of whatever we refuse to burn. Visitors had placed tiny paper lily in a bowl by the pedestal, messages folded into petals. Eve unfolded one at random. "I planted truth today." Another, "Forgave my father for leaving." Paper whispered, releasing strangers' resolutions like faint perfume. She thought of Lila this morning, standing on their porch with steaming coffee, waving Eve off for her lecture circuit. The garden behind her mother had glowed white with lily blooms, so dense the beds looked snowed upon even in June. Daniel's name never passed their lips now, but his absence sat at the table politely, chair always pulled out. Sometimes it poured. The coffee before vanishing. Eve's phone vibrated, message from Iris. "Train on time. Meet you Cafe Aurora noon. Bring the story you promised." A smile flickered. 20 years of shared letters, soil exchanges, cross-country midnight calls had built a sisterhood sturdy enough to hold separate sons. They still mailed each other lily bulbs for every new secret told. Entire community gardens now carried their conversations. Eve walked toward the reading alcove where visitors could leaf through facsimile pages of Lila's memoir. She sat, paper creaking under fingertips, and found the chapter titled "Walls That Spoke." The passage opened with adult, Eve's own courtroom letter words she had once trembled to say aloud. She read the lines as though tasting them for the first time. "If a house can learn to talk, so can a family. Listen, the hinges ask for oil, not silence." She closed the book softly, inhaled vanilla ghost from aging reproduced pages. Memory rolled in like low tide. She pictured teenage herself and Iris planting lily beside the side yard, each bulb a folded confession. She remembered the first time Daniel visited that garden, years after the verdict, standing awkward in borrowed courage. He had apologized not for leaving, but for having left unfinished children in his wake. Layla thanked him, served cake, then asked him to weed the beds if he wanted penance. He knelt, hands deep in forgiving soil until dusk claimed the apology. Eve held that piece of past gently. Forgiveness was a blade only safe when used for pruning. A soft chime announced the hour. Museum lights brightened incrementally. She rose, heading toward the exit, heels clicking a rhythm reminiscent of Grandpa's mantel clock, a pulse the house once breathed through storms. Near the doors, A small interactive display invited contributions. Write a letter meant for tomorrow. Blank postcards waited in a wooden tray, pencils sharpened to invitation. Eve selected one. Front side bore a pale watercolor of Lily bending in wind. She began to write, lines coming slow, distilled. Dear reader who hasn't arrived yet, May. You treat secrets like seeds. Bury them only if you're willing to water what grows. May your walls learn kindness before thunder finds them. And if something precious refuses to open, keep listening. Locks teach patience more than doors do. She paused, hearing Lila's laugh in her blood, tasting Daniel's absence like a mild salt, feeling Iris's text humming promise. She finished the card, signed, Eve, someone who learned that maps can hide inside broken jewelry. She slid the postcard into the collection slot. Mechanics whisked it away. Somewhere within walls, a scanner archived her words for future exhibit rotations. Perhaps a decade from now another adult child would stand here, reading letters from strangers who survived storms and lullabies alike. Outside, river sunlight startled her eyes. She stood a moment on the granite steps, bag slung over shoulder, hair teased by gentle breeze. Across the street, a busker played cello, notes rising warm and grave. Eve fished in her purse, dropped a lily bulb into his open case. Copper coins shone around the strange gift. Music faltered, then resumed with a smile tucked in its bowstrokes. Cafe Aurora's striped canopy flashed down the block. She walked toward it, city hum stitching around her like necessary noise. As she reached the first crossing light, her phone pinged again, an email this time. Subject line, Archive Acquisition Confirmation. The curator thanked her for donating Daniel's last voice memo, recorded the week before he died. No blame, only a list of recipes he hoped she'd try. Ending with Iris and Eve will know which ones need more sugar. She saved the message to a folder titled Soft Shadows. It felt right to let his voice live in public air, filed among apologies and almond extract. Everyone deserved a shelf somewhere, even echoes. At the cafe entrance, Iris waved through window glass, 2 mugs already steaming between pastries. Eve paused to watch, her sister's face reflected in the pane alongside her own. 2 overlapping profiles, neither diminished. The locket at her chest dangled open, catching sun, throwing fractured rainbows across the sidewalk. A child passing by chased the colors with bare hands, laughter trailing. Eve stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed the exact pitch of home. Iris rose. They exchanged an easy side hug, routine now, like turning a familiar page. On the table lay a blank notebook and spare pen space ready for the story Eve had promised. She sat, took the pen, breathed cinnamon steam. Words arrived patient and sure. She titled the piece Letters Meant for Tomorrow and began with a line she'd carried for years. Finally ripe, what we locked away became the map back to ourselves.